I did a research paper on George Orwell for my English 112 class last semester, and so I thought I'd talk about what I did to find information. So, the basics for the topic was to discuss a biographical research paper on an author. And I didn't know a lot about George Orwell. I knew he was British. And I knew he wrote a lot of books, and I had read several of his books in the past, so I didn't know a lot about him as a biography, so I wasn't really sure where to start, so I just did a basic search. So we would see what would come up. And the point of the research assignment was to tie back what, like his life story to what it revealed in his books. So how much of his writing impacted, or was impacted, by his life. Okay, so I just did a basic George Orwell search, and there were several articles that would come up. Like, I would probably select this one because you're supposed to tie back to the writing, so I knew Animal Farm was one of the books he had written, and as this was one of the books I had read, choosing a source, probably not this one, on Animal Farm would be good. This is not. Here we went. Article databases. Orwell. Full text. Peer reviewed. Search. Okay, this was the screen I was looking for. So, okay, like I selected this article in the full PDF because it was on the road to Wigan Pier, which this was a story I had not read on George Orwell, but it was one that would be interesting to look at. So, it's 14 pages long. The first thing I do is go and I look at a conclusion. So, this last paragraph here in the article mentions a lot about politics, and from my basic knowledge on George Orwell, I know socialism was a big topic for his, so this would be an article which the road for Wigan Pier, or the road to Wigan Pier, was about a coal mining community that would be impacted by socialism. It was a narrative that he wrote back in the 30s, and it would be tied into political issues, and that might not be what I was interested in following. So you go back here, and you look for, like, this one. George Orwell's 1984. The article reveals an unknown fact of the Polish translation of the famous political novel 1984. So, because this says Polish translation, is more interested in information that they found when it was translated in a different one. So I found that just because the article's title says something that would be interesting or maybe useful for the story doesn't necessarily guarantee that's the truth. But George Orwell in our time. So Okay. So this abstract talks about how a lot of his writings mention the political climate of the 30s and 40s and how we could still use that to today. So I chose this article because it was written back in 2016, so it wasn't too old, but it still went in depth not only on why it was useful back in the 40s and 30s, but tying it to the modern era. So be more relatable when talking about the biography. I keep my tabs either open on the side so I can easily access them, because when I use the database, if I copy and paste a link into a Word document like I do when I'm researching just through Google, then I won't necessarily be able to access it because I need my password and the access code. And I found if my login timed out, then I cannot get back into it and I have to restart my search. That's why I think databases are pretty hard to use, because you have to be very specific. Sometimes being too specific can cause issues. So you narrow it too far down. Other times it's not narrowed down enough. Another thing I had an issue with was it was a very broad topic to just Google or to look up and write a research paper on somebody. So a lot of the times if you just look up and you find a basic biography, this could be useful, like this one, to help find a jumping off point on what you want to look up or what you want to find. I selected this one because he's British. This is information on him from the British Library. Just like if you want to find information on Thomas Jefferson, you might want to look up the Monticello page, the official Thomas Jefferson website. It might be a little biased or slanted because it's about them, but it would be a good way to find information. I find it's best when you're researching stuff to trust but verify. So if you read something on somebody and you're like, oh, that's a unique fact, or that's pretty cool, it's good to look to see if it's listed someplace else as well, and it's not just a random fact people put in. So this article, it's like over here, has his name, and this was his official name, not just his pen name. What he did for a living. It talks about how he was not only a journalist, but a political writer and an essayist. It talks about the dates for his birth and his death. So, basic biographical facts. And then it outlines some of the work that he's done. So it's like, I had never heard of The Road to Wigan Pier, but it was a very strong comparison of the of classism in the UK, and it was a very interesting read, and was not exactly something I would consider reading, because when I originally thought George Orwell, the first thing that comes to mind is 1984, Animal Farm. But finding a basic biographical information is a good jumping off point. So he went to Eton, and this would be some good information you research. The Down Out in Paris and London is because it's a nonfiction based off of his life. So upon reading this story, or this book, you learn more about him, because it was written by him, about his experiences trying to become published and trying to work in both Paris and London. Okay, go back over here. Again, I leave the links open, or sometimes I'll pull up a Word document and I'll just start copying and pasting, and I'll go through and I'll do bullet points on such information, like talk about the road to Wigan Pier, and talk about lower upper middle classism, and mentions coal workers. It might talk about how he went to Eton. Maybe mention how he was born in India. Put some of this information in the Word document. Maybe go over here and have a specific section dedicated to this. Just try to keep track of my thoughts, because a lot of things can start running together. And a lot of times, if I know I'm going to use information, I'll go and I'll cite it first. So I'll write the works cited page and I'll keep the citation next to it, so I know what the in-text citation is going to look like, so I can keep the in-text citation next to the facts that came directly from it, so I don't get confused about where I got information from, or what belonged to what. This is a .org, which in high school I was taught, .edu, .orgs. They are usually the more factual ways to get information, because it's an organization, but I've also found that in recent years you can buy a website and have .org put on it, or it could be a blog, and just because it says .org does not necessarily guarantee it's published by an organization. So that's one thing I always look out for. Like, see, this one at the bottom is a .org, but it was pulled from the wikipedia.org, so I wouldn't use that one. But see, then this one, it's not a .org, it's a .com, but it was written by the Orwell Foundation. Well, it starts at the top with a very biased opinion, talking about most influential writers, how that's pretty subjective, but like here it mentions, this is the first time from doing this research, it mentions homage to Catalonia, which that was a big, at least in my mind, part of doing research for him, because this was a time that he went to Catalonia and he actually fought with the rebel army. It was not just a journalist. So, like here, this is where he mentions reporting on the war in Catalonia, how he was shot in the neck. But a lot of these sites, they mention how he started as a policeman in Burma, and then he worked in London for a while and was a dishwasher in Paris, and then he started visiting places like Wigan and Catalonia, doing database searches. Do not necessarily guarantee you will find that information, but if you start with Google, then you can find other keywords. So you can do this. Nothing involving the homage to Catalonia came up in the original search. Now there's only 8 stories. We'll see if anything comes to mind. Okay. Okay. Now, this one has nothing to do with Catalonia, but I'd like to check it out. Okay. So, this article, while titled an overview of Orwell's Animal Farm, it does mention the Spanish Civil War and how he went to observe, and it